Yo guys, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Bachiru. So in this video, I want to talk about frame data and hitboxes, and I want to explain why it's so important in a game like Guilty Gear Strive. I feel like if you want to enjoy the game on a very high level, you need to understand these two concepts, and I feel like they're basically you're dissecting the game by now, just to understand how things work. If you're playing just to enjoy online and you don't want to get super competitive, I feel like you don't really need to invest much time in knowing frame data, but by understanding frame data and how hitboxes interact with each other in this game, since it's a slower paced game, like with less gatherings, a lot of things will start to make sense for you, like how some attacks, why they hit that way, why some interactions you lost it. So by understanding these concepts, I hope that this will help you just to clarify like on some of the things that you're struggling, but you cannot like find an answer for. As usual, guys, I really appreciate all your support. Let me know in the comments what are the topics you want me to cover. I'm streaming on Twitch every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so come hang out with me, and let's begin this video. Okay, let's start by explaining frame data. Fighting games, they run on the speed of 60 frames per second. It means that once every 60th of a second, like one frame is displayed. So moves in this game, like your punches, your kicks, your slash, your throws, etc., like the time it takes for them, like to come out, to hit, to recover, etc., we count it by frames. So what are the frames that we usually count in this game? So the first thing is we count what's called a startup frame. A startup frame is how much time it takes for a move to come out. So a general rule of thumb, punch is the fastest button, like it has the fastest startup, and that's what we call a jab by default, but some characters, they have exceptions to that rule. Kicks are slightly faster than the punches. Slashes and heavy slashes, they are usually slower attacks, and all characters, they have the same speed when it comes to dust and the charges dust. So startup frames is how much for the move to come out. The thing is, the faster the move by rule, the less reward it comes out of it. So for example, if you do a 5 punch, this is for Ramlethal's case, it's a 5 frame startup. So it takes 5 frames for this move to come out. But since it's a fast move, and it can beat slower moves, there is little reward after it. So if I do 5 punch, I can link it into 5 punch, and I'll explain this, why this happens, like very shortly. However, if you do, for example, a slash, since it's a slower move, you can link it to another move, which is a stronger move. The second thing actually is something we call active frames. Active frames is how much frames your move remains to hit. It means that how much time your move stays on the screen and it's attacking the opponent. Usually moves like with very long active frames, like your opponents, it's really hard for them to challenge it because that move's staying there for a very long time. So, for example, in the case of Ramlethal, let's say, for example, we will do a far slash. Far slash, once it starts up around 11 frames, it will stay active for 6. You see how Ramlethal like will throw the sword and it will stay there for a while. During that portion, that sword is hitting. So if Soul approach her and while this sword is still active, he will be hit by the move. All right? So now let's talk about recovery frames. Recovery frames is how much time it takes for you to be able to move again, like after the move is being done. For example, jabs and kicks, they are relatively fast moves. So they start up quickly and they recover quickly. So we call them that they have fast startup. Fast startup is a good term in fighting games. It means that this move comes out really quickly. And it has a very fast recovery. Fast recovery, it means that you can move really quickly afterwards. If you hear a move that it has a slow startup and a slow recovery, generally speaking, this move is not that good by design. Okay? So for example, kicks are the same. As you can see, when I attack, I can move almost immediately after the punches. For example, for slash and heavy slash, since they have long active frames, it takes a while for Ram to move, as you can see. Even the heavy slash, as you can see, it takes very long time for her to move. So the equation in fighting games is that if the move has a fast startup, it will and fast recovery, it will have little active frames. If the move has a slower startup and slower recovery, it will have more active frames. So it's a matter of balancing when it comes to that. And usually the moves that have longer active frames are the moves with longer range. This is why, because if you do a move that takes long time to recover, but it's very active, it means that your opponent can jump of it, or they can actually punish it since it's a slow move. However, if it hits, generally speaking, you're usually at a disadvantage, either by something that we'll cover soon, like by what we talk about, like plus or minus on block, or since they are far away and they cannot do anything about it. Because remember, since your longer moves have more active frames, their slower moves with less active frames, is very hard for them to counter it. But we'll dive deeper into that because it's not that simple, unfortunately, in fighting games. So after we talk about startup, active frames, and recovery, we'll talk about something called if a move is positive or negative on block, or positive and negative on hit. So usually, any attack you do, for example, a 5K, it can either be advantageous for you as an attacker on block. If a move is plus on block or it has very little minus frames on block, it means that usually you as the attacker, you can still act and you can keep your turn and your opponent cannot act back. However, if the move is very minus on block, it means that this move, your opponent, after blocking it, they can punish it. So in the case of Romlethal's 5K, this move starts in 7 frames. It's relatively fast and it's -2 on block. So what does -2 on block means? It means that Sol needs to have a 3-frame startup attack to be able to punish Romlethal if she does another move after 5K. So for example, in the case of Sol, his job is 4 frames. But due to the nature of Guilty Gear Strive and how pushback works in this game, when you do 5K, even though it's minus, since it pushes the opponent away, it means that Sol doesn't have an answer that is long enough in its hitbox to answer the follow-up for that move. So if Romlethal does 5K into 5K from this range, Sol doesn't have a button to challenge it, except if he does a reversal. So what happens is that actually, in this game, frame data works in a way that the moves that are minus on block, usually they become safer due to how pushback works in this game. However, if your opponent knows how to do instant blocking, which is the block that doesn't push the opponent away, if Romlethal tries to do this, Sol can interrupt it with a jab, because he has a quick jab, which is a 4-frame, and the fastest attack for Romlethal is a 5-frame. It means that Sol has a 1-frame advantage over Romlethal in that particular situation, actually, just to counter her. But again, due to how pushback works in these games, a lot of moves that look on frames unsafe, like for example, this move, the far slash, it's -10 on block. -10 is a lot, by the way. But due to the fact that this move pushes Sol really far away, Sol needs to have a move that is so fast to counter it from that range. So that's why we call spacing is very important in this game. Because, for example, if you do this far slash from this range and you don't follow up with anything, Sol can counter it with a faster attack. So the way that you make your attacks safer is after you understand like the frame data, the general idea of it, is how you space it properly. So even though you're minus on block, that's the time that you can actually still keep your 10 or space yourself to be safe all the time. On the other hand, if a move is plus on block, it means the attacker has a very big advantage over your opponent and they cannot act on it, even though you're very close to them. So, for example, when it comes to Ram, when she throws this sword, the first hit of the attack actually is +3 on block. It means that Sol needs to have an attack, like it's 3 plus 5, which is faster than Ram. He needs to have an 8-frame attack or faster to be able to interrupt it. That's why when you do this sword move and you try to follow up after it, Sol has faster attacks to counter it. However, if you throw this sword, the first attack is +9. It means that Romlethal can do this +9 and do a 7-frame move and Sol will not interrupt it. So let me just show you a quick example. What do I mean? Because I feel like it's really hard to put this into words. So as you can see, depending on how much your move is minus on plus on block, it means how much like you get to keep your turn as an attacker. On the other hand, as a defender, if you understand how much your opponent's move are disadvantageous on block for them, that's the time that you mean that you can actually get your turn back. So if you feel like their moves are really slow, for example, if I do this from here, so for example, if for your opponent, example, they poorly space their attack, as you can see, this move has a very long recovery window. So they need to rely on meter actually just to make it safe. So what is good frame data? good frame data actually in a fighting game it's all about balance, and developers, if they skew too far, like you're making a move really, really good, that's when a move becomes imbalanced. So what's an imbalanced move, for example? An imbalanced move is a move that has a very fast startup, it has long active frames, and it has very quick recovery. These moves are usually too good, and developers, they have to balance out the moves. That's why, for example, jabs, they have very fast startup but low active frames and quick recovery. On the other hand, these moves like the slash and the heavy slash, they have slower startup but they have more active frames and longer recovery. So it's a matter of balancing act. And in this game, just to summarize really quickly, for moves that are even like super minus on block, as long as you space the moves properly, you get to keep your turn, because your opponent needs to have a quicker answer, like a move with quicker frame data and like a faster recovery or more active frames to be able to beat that moves. However, that's one factor of the equation. Now we will move into what we call actually hitboxes, and I feel like this is something you really need to understand in Guilty Gear 5, because moves are so deceptive in this game. Like moves have much more range than it looks. Okay guys, so now thanks to the power of PC, we're gonna use a tool, but this tool is purely for educational purposes. So I'm not gonna link it, and I am not endorsing the use of this tool. This is purely for educational purposes, and this is just to teach a point, a basic fighting game concept. Unfortunately, the game doesn't come like with this feature built in. This is available in other Arc System Works games, like for example, Dragon Ball FighterZ. It's available in Skullgirls, etc. So don't use this in matches. I'm not gonna link to it, so use it at your own discretion. So with the power of PC, what we can actually do now is enable something called the Hitbox Viewer. Guys, I keep saying don't use this in matches because this is considered a form of cheating, okay? And you never cheat to get an advantage on your opponent. You have to play fair. Voila. Now, thanks to the power of PC, we have something called the Hitbox Viewer. So what is a Hitbox Viewer? This tool allows you actually to see like where your character can be attacked, where your character can be like safe, or how far is your attacks can reach, so on and so forth. So let's explain a little bit something about hitboxes. Yeah. So whenever you do an attack, the body of your character, it will have 4 different properties. So here is signified by the squares. So the green one is usually the hitbox. It means that where you can attack your opponent. The red square is actually, red rectangle is your attacks hitbox. It means that this is the portion that hits your opponent. Most moves around the hitbox, there is like a blue rectangle. This is what we call a counter state hurt box. Hurt box is the location where your opponent can attack and they can counter hit you. So for example, 5K, if it interacts with the hitbox of Sol, it will attack. However, if Sol manages to hit the blue rectangle, he can actually score a counter hit against Ramlethal. So that's why spacing in this game is so important. On the other hand, actually, some of your attacks, they have something called a throw hurt box. It means that if your opponent manages to throw you within that range, it means that they can counter your attack with a throw. So for example, if Ramlethal did, for example, 5 kick, which is a 7-frame startup, and Sol attempts to do a throw, which I think around like 2 or 3 frames, if he's within the range of her hitbox, he can grab her out of the attack. So that's something really important to understand. And this is something so significant in Guilty Gear, by the way, because a lot of times what happens actually is you will knock down your opponent, then you will go really close to them. Then they will grab you out of your attack. So this is the reason why spacing is really important in this game. Because as you can see, once I knock down Sol, even if I do 5K, he's in the range of her throw hurt box. However, if you knock him down, for example, like that, and you space yourself properly, outside of the throw hurt box of Ramlethal, that's the time you can actually like beat their throw. So this is one solution why this happens. So usually, as a rule of thumb, quicker attacks, they have shorter hitboxes, but they are faster. So that's why they balance the game. So for example, 5 punch, as you can see, its range is really near Ramlethal. Actually, it's around the hand only. 5K is a move considered with a good like hitbox information. Why? Because it has a good range. It extends outside of Ramlethal's hurt boxes, and as you can see, the counter hurt box is really slim. for that case. And in this game, Guilty Gear Strive, usually the longer range attacks, they're really insane. They have really insane hitboxes. As you can see, for example, the first slash of Ram Lethal, as you can see, the hitbox portion of the sword extends really far away from Ram Lethal, and there's like a big portion where Sol cannot do anything about it until he reaches the part where there's like a blue rectangle, and that's the time that he can hit it. So that makes it really important. Why? Because, for example, if Sol is throwing an attack and it has a counter state hitbox, Ram Lethal can actually do an attack with a longer hitbox and manage to score a counter hit against Sol. That's why spacing in this game is so important, and it's really important also to understand your hitboxes and your hitboxes in a game. Because, for example, for a move like this move is very insane. You know why? Because it has a huge frontal hitbox, and the hitbox is really far away, so the opponent really needs to jump. And as a rule of thumb, in any fighting game, if a game has a long horizontal hitbox, it will have shorter vertical hitbox. That means that your opponent can jump out of it. However, on the other hand, if your attack has a long vertical hitbox, it will have a shorter, It will have a shorter horizontal hitbox. This is the way that like fighting games unbalance. And usually when it comes to anti-airs, for example, 6P, as you can see, the hitbox is on top and the hitbox is below, actually. Why this is happening? Because anti-airs in this game, we have something called, they are head invulnerable. It means that if your opponents try to jump on you and they try to attack the head of Ram Lethal, the only thing that they will be meeting is only the hitbox. That's why you cannot beat anti-airs in this game when you do jump-ins. The only thing you can do actually is something we call a safe jump, is when you jump and you do an attack and it's safe enough for you to land and block at the same time. That's why anti-airs in this game are really, really strong. Because your opponent, I feel like they're really good in neutral especially. Because the only way that your opponent can counter-attack those anti-airs, actually if they sweep. So as you can see, the hitbox of Ram Lethal in that case actually is below. So if Sol manages to sweep this anti-air, that's the time that he can actually punish it. But if he tries to do a jump in, that's the time that he will be met actually with a punish. And the good thing about anti-airs in this game is they're really, really fast. So for example, in the case of Ram Lethal, her anti-air is a 9-frame startup, actually, which is really good. Even though it has shorter active frames, which is around 2 frames, it's really fast. It doesn't stay long on the screen. It's really fast, and it protects her head all the time. So in cases where Sol's attacks don't hit Ram Lethal low, she can actually counter them with 6P. That's what makes 6P such a good move. However, if Sol does a sweep, it will be punished dearly. So why this is really important in Guilty Gear Strive? In Guilty Gear Strive, this game, it has fewer gattlings. What that means actually is that this game, you cannot link a lot of moves into each other. You can link actually kicks into sweeps, etc. So the concept of gatling pressure in this game, it means which is you link one move to the other, doesn't really exist. So a lot of times what happens actually is in neutral is your opponents will throw out attacks, so they will attempt to hit you or to pressure you. So if you understand where the range of their attack ends and where you can actually punish them for it, or which attacks that can actually override their hitboxes and hit them while you keep on safe, this will really help you in something we call the neutral game and in whiff punishing. The also good thing about it is you understand where your character can be thrown and where they cannot be thrown. I know this video is more on conceptual things, but I need people to understand what is frame data and hitboxes, because I feel like in the long run this will become really important, especially in high level play, if you want to get into high level play. And in some cases it explains a lot of the weird stuff that happens. Because for example, an attack like Ram Lethal's jump heavy slash, this move is insane, by the way. You know why? Because if you look at the frame data, the hitbox of Ram Lethal is so small, and as you can see, the sword is really has a thick boy hitbox, and this move is so active, by the way, when it hits. So as you can see, that move actually either hits front or back, which is insane. So if you didn't understand how the hitbox of that attack works, you might be surprised, why this attack hits me in front, even though the sword portion is slim on the other side. So just to recap, guys, a move with good hitbox information, actually, it will have a very large hitbox, it will have a very small hitbox, and very small counter hit hitbox, and it will have very slim throw range in this game. That's why it's really important to space your moves in a game like Guilty Gear Strive. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. The next two guys that I will do is one pertaining to Six Punch, which is the anti-air, and I feel like this is a really strong move in the game, and you can use it not only as an anti-air. And the video after it will be talking about meter gain in Guilty Gear Strive, because I feel like meter gain is really insane in this game, and I will explain like how to optimize meter gain and how you can abuse it actually in matches. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all the support. If you have any questions, just hit me up in the comment section below, and I'll catch you in the next video. Yalla, this is your boy Bachiru. Peace.